Hi, everyone. My name is Audrey Patchett. I'm a customer success manager here at Apttus, and I'd like to introduce our next set of speakers. Here with us today from Hewlett-Packard Enterprise, Office of the General Counsel, we have Molly Perry, Chief Operating Officer, as well as Michael Pasias, Operations Manager. And I'm really excited about the information they're going to share with you today. I've been quite interested in the work that they've done and their commitment around innovation and process improvement. So you guys, thank you so much for coming, and I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Audrey. So for those of you that saw Jeffrey Ma yesterday morning, it was really a perfect lead-in to our presentation here today. As Audrey mentioned, Michael and I both work in legal operations at Hewlett-Packard Enterprise. HPE was formed November of 2015 when Hewlett-Packard split into two Fortune 50 companies. It was the largest corporate separation in history. Since that time, we've continued to evolve. We just completed another $20+ billion spin out of our enterprise services business. That business merged with CSC and is now a new company called DXC. We'll be doing another multi-billion dollar spin later this year. Our software companies will merge with a UK-based company called Micro Focus. And along the way, we've been doing quite a few acquisitions to build up our core enterprise business. A few years ago, as HP, and then now ongoing as HPE, we made a very conscious decision to try to run our legal organization as a data-driven organization. And it was really helpful because, as you can imagine, these large separations and combined with ongoing acquisitions can create a lot of operational challenges. But fortunately, because we'd invested in that infrastructure, we've been able to complete all of these mega transactions not only on time, but under budget. So it's really paid off for us on a transactional level, but it's also paid off for us quite a bit on an operational level. So when we talk about being data-driven, what do we mean? Like many of you, we've implemented quite a few best-in-class applications for our legal workflows. We implemented Apttus, contract lifecycle management. We have matter management, e-billing, IP asset management, case management, and dozens of other applications installed at HPE. And with those applications, obviously you install them primarily to do the workflows. But those applications also give you literally millions and millions of data points, which you can harvest for operational excellence. So there's a lot of talk about metrics in legal operations. It's really, there are a few little buzzwords out there, and metrics is certainly a very hot topic. Why do we care so much about metrics in legal operations? Well, the survey data shows that the majority of legal departments are incurring year-over-year budget reductions. At the same time, however, the demand for legal services in our organizations is either staying the same or growing. So what this really means is that we need to have an ongoing, continuous improvement in our organizations. So now I'm going to turn it over to Michael, who's going to talk a little bit about the process and the data behind a successful continuous improvement program.
All right, thank you, Molly. Okay, so great to be here. This is a fantastic event. Thank you for Apttus letting us talk today. Data is, basically the foundation for any good project. You have to know what you're solving to start with, though. I'm sure everyone here has been asked to run a lot of projects. And what we do is that we make sure that we're solving a real problem first. There's a lot of shiny stones out there. I need this program or that program to solve a problem, and they haven't really defined what the problem is. So we like to stop, and we use data now to have a solid, data-driven problem statement. We start with define. And anyone who's seen this graphic up here that knows Six Sigma, you got to be familiar with this, right? We use Six Sigma as the foundation for all of our project management. We define the problem, we figure out how significant it is, and then we use data and measure. So we validate through the measures phase. And then we go to analyze. Well, then you dimension out the size of the problem and you figure out what root cause is, but you don't stop measuring at that point. You just keep measuring because you're going to measure all the way through control. You have to figure out whether your problem has been solved by your project. You have to measure the control phase so you see what the impact was on the original problem statement. Are you getting the results that you want? We all know that project management isn't exactly a core legal function, right? Project management isn't something I'm particularly strong at in a lot of legal departments. So when you have a lot of data, you start out with an assumption of what the problem and the solution are going to be. You get your data, and you immediately jump to what the solution is. Okay? This is a very, very common issue. And anyone who's run a project, I'm sure you've been told at some point or another, I need you to go implement this solution. Right? They tell you what the solution is. The solution is the end of the process, not the beginning. So if someone tells you, a manager tells you, you need to go implement solution X, you're not really responsible to solve the problem. You're only responsible to implement what they told you to implement. If they tell you to solve a problem, then you're responsible to figure out what the problem is and to solve that problem. So jumping to solution, it really leads to suboptimal designs. You have SMEs out there that know that you didn't listen to them. They know that you didn't take their feedback. You have user dissatisfaction. They know they weren't listened to. You jump to conclusion. You did what you were told though, right? So ROI is typically bad, and rework. I see a lot of projects that are done over and over and over again, and actually those are my favorite type. They're my favorite type of project because I know if someone's going to keep attempting to do a project over and over again, it's got to have some sort of value. There's a real problem there. But I also know that they were probably solving symptoms and they weren't attacking root cause. For me, as somebody who does Six Sigma for many years, that's just an opportunity. I know the process to make this work. So we run people through a validation. We analyze it. We collect the needs of what the customer is. And the customer in our case is typically a deputy general counsel. Right? It could be the business. I want to know exactly what their needs are, and we use data to figure out root cause. We also do process analysis, as you're supposed to, and combine them together, but we're truly data-driven. So now that we've engaged the SMEs, now that we've worked with the people directly, they have a buy-in. They have an automatic buy-in because they were participants, and they provided some of the critical analysis that tells us what does the data mean. We use the data, right? We end up with very high levels of ROI. We also have a lot of reduced rework because it's one and done. We did it right, and we move on to the next project. So I'm going to turn it over to
Okay, thanks, Michael. So I'm going to start with a really simple example of how we applied these concepts. A few years ago, we had a situation in our legal department where various teams were going under budget, over budget, no real coordination, a lot of surprises. And while going over budget is obviously a bad thing, significantly going under budget is not a great thing either, because if your company is like ours, once the quarter's over and that money's unspent, it doesn't roll over. So you've got a permanent loss of resource when that occurs. So one of the first tasks that my boss gave me when I was placed into this role a little over 3 years ago was to stop the surprises. So we walked through this process. We actually had some Six Sigma black belt people come work with us, got in a conference room. We kept it pretty light touch, but we walked through all of the different processes, and what we found is we had a lot of different people doing things differently and not really understanding the consequence of their actions in many cases. So we kind of tore the processes apart, put them back together, came up with something that was a little bit more consistent and more predictable. We also made it a point to really understand what were the areas of flexibility. What could we push out? What could we pull up? What were the areas of risk? Where were we potentially subject to the most surprises where we could kind of buffer for those? And then we gave the team a metric or a goal. Made them very nervous. Not everyone likes having a very measurable target, but our goal was that every single quarter we would have 99% forecast accuracy. Again, not everybody was happy about that, But we did it the first quarter, and we did it every quarter after that. Now, you may be wondering why our budget dropped so precipitously, and that was when we separated. So we had to take the HP budget for the legal department, carve it into 2 new budgets for 2 new companies, and this was our share of the pie. We were pretty nervous when that happened because we had muscle memory as HP, didn't really know how easy or difficult it was going to be to apply those same concepts to a brand new, basically we were a $50 billion startup. But the process worked, and we did another repeat performance. For over 3 years now, every single quarter, we have been above 99% utilization. I just talked to one of my ops managers today. We just finished our second fiscal quarter. We came in at 99.5% of budget, and we do it very predictably now. So that was kind of job one. That was basically the first step in our metrics journey. But what that told us is that we really needed to understand more about the drivers of our spend. What's behind the numbers, and how do we take control of them? How do we manage them as opposed to reacting to them when we get surprises? So we're going to use some examples from the Apttus application where we started harvesting data about our contracting activities. So one of the things we started measuring out of Apttus was how long it took us to respond to requests from our sales organization. And this wasn't so much about saving money, but it was more about customer satisfaction. Many of you who do sales-side contracting have probably heard complaints from the sales team that they lost a deal because of legal, or that legal wasn't responsive enough. So we wanted to have data to show how responsive we in fact were. And again, we set targets for our attorneys. When we first started measuring this, the target we gave to our legal staff was that they would be expected to respond to any request for contract support within 48 hours. And we measured it, we reported it out. And what we found is, as we measured and reported it, the response times got shorter and shorter. So we quickly changed that objective to 24-hour response time. And we found consistently the teams were actually beating that number. So today, the average response time to a request for contract support averages under 18 hours. So we feel that that's a reasonable goal, good performance, so we wanted to move on to other types of metrics and look for other ways to do better. So we started looking at what happens once we begin that work. We got a lot of data out of Apttus. Before we started harvesting this data, we really had no idea what our people were working on. I mean, their managers would know they're working on different deals, but we really couldn't observe it, measure it, and see how well distributed our workloads were. But now, with the data that we're capturing by person, by geography, by business, by price point, we can see what's in work. So we quickly started looking at things like how much of our work is at low transaction value, how much of our work is at high transaction value. Michael talked a minute ago about jump to conclusion. Lots of conclusions were jumped to based on this data. There was initially some concern that our people's time was being distributed according to volume, meaning that we were probably spending way too much time on the low value deals. We wanted to know if that was true, but clearly the data that we had wasn't going to get us all the way there. Another piece that we wanted to understand is, how long is it taking us to get from start to finish? Because we're focused on sales side contracting, a signature yields revenue. The sooner you can get a contract executed, the sooner you can ship that product or perform that service and book that revenue. So just like the sales request numbers, when we started measuring and reporting out time to signature, it got some focus, and the average time to signature has come down. We think there's still a lot of opportunity to improve that. Going back though to the workloads, as I mentioned, there was a really important missing ingredient here, and that was understanding the actual time spent. We could see when we started, we could see when we ended, we could see what was happening in progress in terms of volume, value, et cetera. We really didn't know if our people were spending their time the way we would like them to. So we took the rather unusual step of instituting time recording across our legal function. And I know a lot of people think that's a suicide mission, but I have to tell you, we've been doing it for a little over a year, and the information that we're harvesting from it, in large part because of the way we instituted it and set it up, has been phenomenal. And it's been yielding a lot of learnings and a lot of opportunities to very quickly change how we work and arrive at savings. So Michael's going to talk a little bit about the contracting example on time recording.
Yeah, so, data is, again, what this is all about. And Apttus data is really the lifeblood of what we need. But with that time element adds effort. So I remember a little whiteboard war between SVPs, I don't know if John was there, about where we were spending our time, and everyone was convinced that we were not spending the time on these low value deals, and we pulled the data, and sure enough, we were spending a good amount of time on deals worth less than $250,000. So that was not exactly the message we wanted to hear, right? So the data enabled us, to make a shift, right? All we did was we worked with HBR Consulting. We set up time tracking. We connected it to the Apttus data. So now that is the measure of effort now. So imagine this. Let's say you go paint your house today. Well, that's one item. You only did one thing today. You have a count of one. That doesn't sound very impressive. You add amount of time, and suddenly that's a huge amount of effort. So having a count and a dollar value is a piece of it, but the effort is the time. You need both elements to have this very, very complete picture. Okay, so this disproportionate amount of time that we spent on low value deals, we took our labor and we were able to shift them within a very short period of time. Some very excitable, management about where they're spending time, and magically now we were 28% reduction in the amount of time we spent on low value deals, and we were better able to utilize the resources that we had, right? So again, time and the Apttus data and the time data made it very actionable. I had to take all the numbers off this, but you know how much outside counsel costs, right? You get a bill. You know exactly down to the time, the person, the region, you know where they sit. So how do you compare what you're doing internally versus what they're doing? Well, now that you have this time element matched with the Apttus data, I know how much it costs per contract. I know how much time they spend on the contract. I know who spent the time on the contract. I know where to allocate my resources. I know exactly how I want to have the highest, most experienced attorneys function in the most complex operations and the most complex deals, and we take the younger, less experienced folks and we can put them on, smaller, easier tasks. I know how to allocate that time. I can change my labor and resource mix so that I can use offshore resources for some more of the mundane, very, very low-end work that we can't we can't have our VP attorneys working on, right? So we made that shift. This has improved our ability to utilize our resources very significantly. In a time of, as Molly said, reduced budgets, more constraints, you have to be more efficient in how you work with your staff.
So as I mentioned earlier, we were having fun collecting data, but the data wasn't always actionable. My boss would refer to this as a snow globe. It's really pretty, it's fun to look at, but doesn't really do anything. So we've been maniacally focused on making sure that we're putting data sets together that actually tell us what to do and allow us to measure whether it's working. We talked a lot about contracting, obviously because we're at the Apttus conference, but also because we do virtually all of our sales side contracting in-house, so this data has been hugely beneficial to us. In other legal areas, we have more of a mix of in-house versus outside counsel staffing on our projects. But the same principles applied. In contracting, we were principally looking for ways to be more efficient with internal resources. In some of our other work streams, we obviously wanted to be as efficient as we could be internally, but we also needed to understand internal-external mix and where we had opportunities to toggle between the two and where we can and we should. We began bringing our IP work in-house a number of years ago. And what we saw is as we began to do patent filings in-house, our compensation did go up, but our total spend level in that activity continued to decline. So we had kind of that top line evidence that we were saving money. But until we instituted the time recording and the business intelligence platform, we really couldn't tell exactly how much and where. So we had a strategy that was working, but we had an opportunity to refine it. So now with the business intelligence platform, and for full disclosure, we implemented Counsel Command from HBR Consulting. Our time data, our transaction data, and outside counsel data, hours, tasks, spend, are all in one platform. So now we can compare what it costs us to do a given task internally, what it would cost or what it does cost when outside counsel performs the same work. And we learned some things there as well. What we learned is that while we were able to validate the savings on patent filings, we were now able to actually see exactly what we were saving, but then we were further able to see that we actually got a higher proportion of savings if we brought the prosecution work in-house. So the IP team was able to take this information and pivot their workloads. Now they're actually pushing more patent filings outside, bringing more prosecution work in-house because they can capture more savings that way. We're also a little unusual in that we hire directly out of law school, and we do some casework, litigation work, in-house, start to finish. Our in-house attorneys prepare the depositions, appear in court, and do the entire litigation. Now, obviously, our mix there is a little different. We still have a higher percentage of litigation work done externally. But we wanted to prove the value of this program. And by being able to cost out our internal attorneys and compare that work with external resources, outside counsel on the same tasks, we're able to very cleanly demonstrate a very significant savings from that activity. Similarly, I mentioned a minute ago, we've been doing a lot of M&A transactions and some really large divestitures. We don't have an internal staff that's capable of taking on all that work, but we do try to do as much as we can. And we've been able to do a comparison of an M&A transaction that was largely internally staffed to a transaction of similar complexity and value that was more heavily staffed with outside counsel. And we can clearly see that the more work we do in-house, the more inexpensive the transaction. So we're really getting some great information. And as I mentioned earlier, this is really giving us a great opportunity not only to learn how to streamline our work, but to learn how to best balance between internal and external resources. This is also leading us to think about some other ways of working. So for example, in litigation, we're starting to look at ways that we might disaggregate that work and have a mixed staffing model where we manage the case and we use outside counsel for some parts of the case, but we work in tandem with them on a mixed staffing model. So the next thing that we're adding to our metrics journey is quality and satisfaction data. I talked a little bit about our experience with doing patent work in-house. One of the other things that we've done with our patent filings is we do a blind quality test of patents that we filed and patents that outside counsel filed to see what the quality ratings are. And what we found is not only were we saving money, but our inventors were happier, and the blind quality tests were coming out stronger for the work that was done internally. So we're doing a couple of things now. We're launching out a customer satisfaction survey. HBR is helping to host this with us. And we're also doing a law performance evaluation survey that we've already collected some feedback on. And the goal here is not just to look at efficiency, but look at whether people are happy with the work. What we're finding is there are some areas where people are really happy, but we're still spending too much. Is there a way to keep them happy and spend a little bit less? There are some areas where the opposite is true, but the place we absolutely don't want to find ourselves is in that lower left corner where we're not efficient and either the quality or the user satisfaction is low. When you see that combination, that's obviously where you need to focus first. So we're just now entering this phase of our kind of metrics gathering and display cycle. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Michael.
All right, thank you. So, okay, we talked about, we have data, fantastic data from Apttus. We have HBR's help with the team time data, so we have time, we have these dimensions. You have all this data, millions and millions of data points. So what? It was expensive to collect. You have to do something with these data, right? And what we've done is we've established kind of a project management office. And we've shifted our culture from the general counsel down to be data-driven. And we launch these Six Sigma projects. When you hear Six Sigma, it can be really intimidating because there's a whole bunch of steps to it. So being practical, we can apply a light touch. So let's say you have the obvious root cause. Well, just because you have obvious root cause doesn't mean you don't do any data analysis. It just means you lighten up on the number of steps that you go through and you don't have a giant project. You still have to have a project charter. You still have to have, a root cause, establish a good problem statement. If this is small, incremental, low-cost work, we don't need to, figure out how to build an airplane here. Now, all day I've been smiling and happy, and my bosses said to me a number of times, what? And I said, I have a big surprise for you. So one of the things we changed recently is the forecasting process, and we got the numbers today, and the most chaotic spend that you can have is litigation spend. We always have a long, nice list there. And we came in with 98.89% accuracy on the new model that we did, and that's the beta version. That's a 3-month forecast in litigation and 98.89% accurate. So that was kind of exciting. That's my big secret today. You're all let in on it. I know you guys aren't as excited as I am, but I'm happy. All right.
I'm excited.
Right. So, so the process works, right? The process works. And now let's say something's really nasty and hairy, and we talked earlier. Someone's doing the same project over and over and over again, and it keeps failing because they keep treating symptoms. All right, we need to step back. Let's do a bigger process. We're going to do maybe there's multiple root causes. There's, an engine with multiple problems is really hard to diagnose. So you don't have complete information. There was a great event where I had all the best experts from one of our departments come up, and we were going to decide on a solution to a problem. And it was my very first day of work in the legal department. And I said, well, I'm the new guy. Help me out. Why don't you just draw a high-level process map, just your first 10 steps. 4 hours later, they did not have 10 steps they agreed upon. Nope, didn't have it. And I said, well, maybe we should do a little bit more robust work here before we spend a few $1 million, because that's what it was going to come out to. We did a full Six Sigma, and we had a profound effect on how we managed deals at that time. So, high cost, high risk, then it's time to run something a little bit more in depth, a little bit more thorough, right? So let's go and let's move to the next slide. This one, there's a lot of information on this slide. So now we've got all the great data from Apttus. I know I'm repeating myself, but it's really the core of so much of our information. We have other sources. Now we have the HBR folks. Thank you for the team time data. And now we've got our hypothesis, and we've decided on a problem statement. Well, we don't have a staff of project managers in the legal department. So how do you manage something like that? Okay, so first off, we have a data-driven culture, but we're starting to take people that are a little bit savvy in the business, and we're training them on how to do project management. And we've integrated them into a non-full-time project management office. We have all of our projects in a tool called Midaxo. If you're familiar with mergers and acquisitions, Midaxo is one of the key tools that's used for that. And essentially, it's also a good project management tool. We put, quite simply, we have a card for every single project. We have the status that's really visible all the way up through management, so you get that kind of support. This is where the rubber hits the road. We've taken the data, and now you're really doing something about it. So for me, it's pretty exciting. You click on one of those cards, and you have a project charter is right there. We talked about that. The project charter is the contract between the project team and the sponsor with the goals of what you're going to achieve that's been proven by data and validated. So you have that underneath this. And then the second graph on the bottom right, every single step within Six Sigma, we standardized. It took us months to put together an entire Six Sigma template that is basically a select by the project manager, pick the pieces you want, so you right-size the project, and then you run the project. This becomes your project plan in and of itself, right? So inside of each one of these steps, there's a template on how to do each step. So remember, we don't have a massive professional project managers. This explains every step within Six Sigma. So what we decided, we would go to the HPE Six Sigma program office, and we showed them what we did, and they said, oh my gosh, we have to have this. They took our process and our steps and they institutionalized across the entire company, right? So the Six Sigma program office for HPE is now using the Midaxo tool with the template. It looks very similar to ours, managing all the projects across the Six Sigma program office with these cards. And it really is an enabler of people that aren't always doing project management to have everything at your fingertips, all the descriptions. Again, we've taken the data, we're now acting on it in a very organized, very supportive environment that we've seen strong results out of, right? So when we're done with the project, we've followed through all the steps, we know what's been done, everything's been recorded, we've monitored the entire time, and basically we close out the project and we continue, as I said earlier, the data analysis doesn't end, the data measurement doesn't end. When you're at the control phase in the final, the far right, we're still measuring to make sure that the team met their commitments. We need to know that they met their commitments. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Molly since we're...
Okay, yeah. So respecting everybody's time, I think we are out of time here, but just wanted to thank you for your attention today. Again, we're really excited that our company has adopted our Six Sigma process and methodology. I don't think that happens very often in a large company, that the legal department actually provides that kind of leadership, so we're really excited about that. But again, just want to encourage all of you to kind of go down this data journey. We've done it, we've had a lot of fun with it, and we've learned a lot. Thank you.